So the Pittsburgh Steelers made some decisions and some announcements ahead of their playoff game against the Buffalo Bills this weekend. TJ Watt is out, not surprising with the knee injury. That's a bad loss. And then the other move that made some noise and news yesterday, easy for me to say, is Mason Rudolph will get the start at quarterback, not Kenny Pickett. And here was Mike Tomlin explaining the decision.
At the quarterback position, we'll stay with Mason Rudolph, much like in the spirit in which we worked a week ago. We're just simply staying with the hot hand and not disrupting the apple cart. We've been in some tough circumstances. He's delivered, we've delivered, and so we will continue in that vein.
Now, if you're Kenny Pickett, you starting to think about the future and what your options are? Because it does feel like them not starting him in a playoff game and must-win games to get into the playoffs would tell me there's not a lot of confidence in Kenny Pickett as the guy.
Yeah, they're going to be looking for a quarterback in the future. They don't believe he's going to be the guy at this point. I mean, that's all I'm reading into it, and I don't like this. I said it when they started him the last game. If Pickett's healthy enough to go and he wants to go and can go, because that's the one thing we don't know. We don't necessarily know about the health, if he's 100% or not. But if he is, and you're not playing him in these circumstances, the writing's on the wall. And I think this offseason they're for sure going to bring someone in. And whether or not that person is going to have a leg up on Pickett, that's yet to be seen. But I would say as of right now, look, there is something to what Mike Tomlin's saying. He's been a winning coach his entire career in the NFL, so he knows better than I. But there is something for not wanting to rock the boat or disturb something if your team has been on a roll lately. And I think he's very cognizant of that. So that's one element at play. But without TJ Watt, Mason Rudolph starting, this team's a 10-point underdog on the road. Biggest spread of the wild card weekend. If Pickett starts, do you think that line changes at all?
Maybe a little bit. Maybe, but I don't think significantly.
I mean, let me ask you this though, and not that I have a picks thing with Pete Prisco and it's coming down to the wire and might need some help, but where are you guys leaning on this one? What are you guys thinking?
Buffalo
laying the 10.
Yeah, which is good news for whoever has Pittsburgh.
I think it's going to be a hard-fought game, and I think that Buffalo's going to have their hands full, but I think that not having TJ Watt is the biggest determining factor here.
Right.
But I agree with you on the Kenny Pickett situation. Listen, there could be a health medical issue that just isn't being, all the way forthright with. Maybe he's just not ready. The whole conversation came up as to why Mike Tomlin still had Kenny Pickett as the number one quarterback on the depth chart, and I know he addressed it in terms of would you like me to change it or whatever, but he is naming a player. He's naming Mason Rudolph the starter while not even having him number one on your depth chart, which seems a little contradicting. It seems a little misleading, but it also sounds like to me you still may have, Kenny Pickett as your guy. He just isn't ready to go, which if that were the case, I don't know why you wouldn't announce that, why you wouldn't say it, just to protect Kenny Pickett from what we're talking about right now. If that's the debate of if they're going to look for a quarterback in the future, if Kenny Pickett isn't the guy that they have confidence in, you open yourself up to having that conversation if you're not playing him and you're not starting him, and this is the playoffs and it's the biggest game of your season. It seems strange.
So
it doesn't seem very, very Mike Tomlin-like to be obscure or not, forthcoming with that type of information, if that's what it is.
A couple years ago, the Rams had a playoff game at Seattle, and they made the decision to start John Wolford, and Jared Goff was the backup quarterback. He was healthy enough to be the backup, but he wasn't healthy enough to get the start. And what ended up happening is there was an injury, and he had to play a majority of the game anyways. If Kenny Pickett's healthy enough to be the primary backup, but he's not getting the start, that would tell me, much like we learned with the Jared Goff situation, that they're out. Like, otherwise, he would get the opportunity. And I think at this point, you kind of know what Mason Rudolph is. Wouldn't you want the opportunity to see what Kenny Pickett can do in a playoff game in a difficult environment on the road? Like, to me, that would tell me a lot more about where he's at than just the assumption that, well, he's not the guy and we're just going to go with Mason Rudolph. That's why it's a little surprising. I mean, if you're a significant underdog anyways, why not give him an opportunity? It's got some Zach Wilson to it almost. Like, why jerk him in and out of the lineup if he's not the guy, you move on, but don't you at least want to see him tested in these spots?
I think the other thing at play is just, don't you want to see him getting more games under Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan calling plays?
Yeah.
I mean, he was improved. The entire offense has been improved since they let go of Matt Canada. And now they're into the postseason. It's like, well, okay, like last week, this week, to your point, like these are the moments that you want to see him compete and see what he's capable of doing. But there's also an element of like, well, let's see what we have in him. So is this something we're going to have to address in the draft next year? Is it something we're going to have to address in free agency? Because, again, it's no disrespect for Mason Rudolph, but he's not the long-term answer there. You know, he's their backup, and he's been there as a backup. It'll now come down to, are they going to look for a free agent? You know, is it Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson type, depending on what happens with those two scenarios? Or is it maybe a guy slides in the draft? But that was the route they went when they got Pickett and taking him in the back of the first round. So a lot of options are on the table. Maybe they're just living in this here and now and like as Mike Tomlin says, trying to ride the momentum. But I also think there's a greater – I mean, of all the teams that are in the playoffs, I think you look at Pittsburgh, you probably look at maybe Tampa as like the two teams you're saying, I don't know if many people are expecting them to win. I mean, Tampa's a 3-point dog at home. And then you've got, Pittsburgh that's a 10-point dog on the road. I would say like those are the two teams you're kind of looking at saying, I'm not really sure how we feel about them, but probably Pittsburgh of anyone in the playoffs right now that you're feeling like least good about their matchup going in the wild card. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Yeah.
People have been very critical of Mike Tomlin and most specifically about the way the offense has played. And while it has improved, that still has been a point of emphasis in terms of, how should they be viewing Mike Tomlin as the guy? I wonder how much pressure this puts on Mike Tomlin and what they do in this game against Baltimore. I mean, we know that he wins and he has a winning record every year, but there's also the conversation that, has he hit the ceiling of how he's winning and what does that look like once you get to the playoffs? Mason Rudolph, he's saying, is the hot hand, and that's who he wants to keep the ball, with and keep it in his hands. But if you had a franchise guy, you don't even have that debate. That's not even something that is a part of the conversation where you have this dual quarterback system, and this is the guy that we're going with this week. I just wonder how much pressure or how much fallout there possibly would be if they don't play well, if the quarterback doesn't look good in a game against a really, really, I mean, right now you got to believe, or odds would say, the Ravens are the team to beat. It's a divisional opponent. It's a divisional rival. If you don't do well, I feel like playing Mason Rudolph, in a way, it does expose the fact that they don't believe in Pickett, because this is too big of a game for Mike Tomlin. Not just like for this team, but this is too big of a game for Mike Tomlin in terms of, in my opinion, how he's looked at and how you look at him moving forward as the leader of this team. I don't think he's immune to that type of judgment at this point.
Yeah, it's I don't understand the move unless there is just, hey, this is a referendum on Kenny Pickett and this is the way it's going to be. But to go with Mason Rudolph, who, by the way, I forgot to mention this, they showed him walking into the game last week in Baltimore. I forgot how big Mason Rudolph is. He is a huge guy.
They showed him walking in with T.J. Watt.
He's bigger than T.J. Watt.
Yeah. I didn't know who it was. I thought it was an offensive lineman.
Like he was sitting on some guy's shoulders. He's like 6'6" or something. Yeah. And I watched that and go, damn, okay. Like he's a big dude, but I don't
He's like 6'5",
yeah,
235. Right?
I don't know if I just never because when I think of Mason Rudolph, right or wrong, I think of him getting hit over the head with a helmet.
That's what I was just going to say. So I mean, you don't remember that incident? I mean, I don't think he looked big in comparison to Myles Garrett that time.
Yeah, that might
it might make more sense why Myles hit him with the helmet, though. 6'5".
Right, he's a big dude.
Damn.
But that's how big Myles Garrett is, that he makes Mason Rudolph, who's a monster, look small. But
He definitely made Mason
everyone
look
kind of
small.
looks big to you, though, Jonas. I mean,
that's not true. I mean, that's not true. When you're stacked and jacked like I am, that's
to the gills.
Yeah, all the way.
I'll say I don't know about stacked. I mean, you might be jacked for a little guy.
Oh, you know I'm yoked. You know what I'm talking about.
You mean
I'm just
you
saying,
mean,
like, you might
Jared
need a
Dad?
step stool to get up there next to Mason Rudolph.
I probably would, actually.
You know?
He's a big dude.
Yeah.
It is Two Pros and a Cup of Joe here on Fox
we're
Sports
done
Radio.
with this conversation?
I think so, unless you have any other
Okay.
thoughts. But let me ask you, where does Pete Prisco, where does he have Pittsburgh on his power rankings? I know you're a big fan of Prisco's power rankings.
I didn't even look.
Yeah.
Can we have Lee effort this while we vamp to just find out where these are?
Also, to your point, Pittsburgh's the biggest long shot to win a Super Bowl in the postseason. So,
Yeah, there we go.
One and
I
done,
mean,
baby.
Look, again, I understand you want to win. That's the objective, and you've had this momentum now. But there still has to be a longer-term vision of, like, if this guy's healthy, let's put him in there, let's play him. There's also the last thing I'll just say is he's got the ability to fix things with his legs on the road in the playoffs, the way this offense has operated. They might need that. Like, there's times when I watch Pittsburgh, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. They're going to need that. Like, they're going to need that from their quarterback position because Mason Rudolph isn't giving them that. I'm not sure they'll be able to protect that well against the Buffalo Bills pass rush too. So I don't know. I think this is one of those where if they're going to go down, why not go down with a guy that you invested a first-round pick in, see if he can help lead you to victory on the road. And if he can't, then it gives you a little more clarity going in the offseason of what that position looks like. But again, maybe they already have that answer.